All right. Hello, hello, hello. I don't see anyone on just yet, but I am going to go on because I I understand those watching the replay. You don't want this huge gap or delay or having to fast forward through to get to the actual content. That kind of annoys me. I don't know about you guys, but hello, welcome. If you're watching the replay, thanks for watching the replay and comment replay so I know who's checking out the replay. And if you are new here, I'm sending you a Texas size welcome. Yes, I'm in Texas. Uh, and also, in case you don't know, I can crack my own self up. I don't have no problem with that. So just FYI. All right. So this video is actually part one of a three-part series I'm doing about the biggest mistakes, the seven biggest mistakes I made as an entrepreneur, and in particular as a new entrepreneur. It is a little hard to believe. It's kind of, I wouldn't say a lot, but it's pretty hard to believe that it's been 13 years or almost 13 years that I have been in business. I run a consultancy called Swag Strategy Solutions, where swag is not just a cool name, although it is kind of cool. It's an acronym that stands for Strategic Women Achieve Growth. Strategic Women Achieve Growth. A bit more on that later, but let's jump into this. So in this video, I'm going to share with you three of the seven mistakes. Again, this is a three-part series. So this is part one. Part two, I cover the next two mistakes. And then in the last video, part three, I will cover two more mistakes, or the last two mistakes. So this one I'm covering three mistakes that I believe were really among the biggest mistakes I made as a new entrepreneur. And frankly, what I see a lot of entrepreneurs, these are mistakes, these are very common mistakes a lot of entrepreneurs make. And so if you are either new in business, if you are considering going into business, even if you've been in business a few years, say 3, 4 or more years, you can still benefit from this because you actually may be making one of these mistakes now, even if you've been in business 3 years, 5 years. I found that sometimes seasoned or experienced business owners still make certain mistakes, and especially some of these mistakes. And I also see this more among women, among my sisters. I just, that has been my experience. I'm a woman. I work with a number of women. And so I'm certainly not saying that men do not experience these mistakes at all. However, I just tend to see more women fall prey to these mistakes. And so the first mistake I want to share with you, and if you need to grab a pen and paper, you want to take notes, maybe if you're driving, don't do that. Don't take notes if you're driving. And yes, I have to tell some people that, because actually I have tried to take notes sometimes while driving. Not like driving on the highway. I don't want y'all to think I'm on the highway trying to take notes. Maybe if you're in traffic, or you have several stops or what have you. But regardless, just if you're driving, just come back and listen to it again as needed. But the first mistake, and I would say probably the biggest mistake, which is why it's number one, is I was not already generating revenue in my business before I quit my job. Let me say that again. I was not already making money from my business when I quit my 9 to 5. Now, a little background, I spent over 15 years in corporate America, mostly working in financial services, in sales roles, in relationship management. That was my last corporate position as a relationship manager for Principal Financial Group. And so while I had done a few entrepreneurial things on the side, from network marketing to some speaking to some consulting to some real estate investment, I did all of those things while having a job. But at the time that I left my job, I was not generating income in any of those capacities, let alone in a full-fledged business. Like I hadn't even formed an actual business. I didn't have an LLC. I didn't have a business account. I didn't have any of that when I quit my job. All I had was that I believed, and I had believed for some time, that I wanted to be in business, like full time, not necessarily on the side. I wasn't sure if I could make that work. I'm Believe me, I didn't have a lot figured out when I quit my job, but I believe that I could make it. What I thought in my mind is, as long as I can replace at least most, that this was my thought process, at least in the beginning of me working for myself, I figured if I can replace even most of my corporate income, which when I left was a six-figure income, I figured I would be good. Now, not to say that that's all I wanted to make the whole time I was in business, but I figured if I could replace 60 to 70% of what I had been making in my corporate job within 3 years, 2, 3 years, I would be good. Like that would be a really good starting point, a good foundation, yada, yada, yada. All right. So that didn't happen. Being transparent, that did not happen. And I really think that was really difficult. The fact that I was not already making some money from a business when I left my job, that made things really difficult. And so I strongly encourage you not to do that. I do know a number of people that don't do that. They transition gradually over time, which I really think is ideal. And when I say over time, I would say over, anywhere between 9 and maybe 18 months. You use that time to gradually transition into full-time entrepreneurship, if that's what you want. Some people do not want to run a business full-time. Some people, they want a job, they want to keep their 9 to 5, and I'm not mad about that. I'm not one of these entrepreneurs who is like, you have to be in your business full-time. I mean, it does help. I think it can make a difference. But the way things are now, especially in this age of AI, automation, all the tools that are out there, all the resources that are out there, again, AI and automation, you really don't have to run your business full time. And if you have the proper help, whether the help looks like a team, whether that team could possibly be a mix between humans and AI agents, however that looks, as long as you have the proper help, you have some support in your business. You don't necessarily have to run your business full time. So I do understand some people have a job, they want to keep their jobs, they want to run their business on the side. But if you are someone, and really like me, you prefer to run your business full time, then I recommend you transition. You take about, again, like I said, roughly a year, but you may be able to do it in less than a year. That's why I said from about 9 to 18 months, perhaps 24 months, take that time to gradually transition into full-time entrepreneurship, because in that time frame, if you're doing what you should be doing, and if you have a solid offer, if you know who your target market is, you should be able to start making some money, gradually grow that money, and ideally, you will have some savings. You will be able to put some money aside so that when you do leave your job, you have some money specifically earmarked for your business, not your emergency savings for you and or your family, not necessarily your retirement savings. Although the truth is, a lot of entrepreneurs do use their retirement savings. I am one of them. I did use a fairly significant amount of my retirement savings. Thank God I didn't use it all. And thank God I had nice amount of retirement savings. I had six figures retirement savings. So when I left my job, so that did help, but that's still not ideal. You still don't want to dip into your retirement savings if you don't have to, because for one, you more than likely are going to be penalized. If you're under the age of 59 and a half, you pay a penalty for that. You pay taxes when you take that money out. So that's not ideal. But that's why you want to have a plan and you want to gradually transition into entrepreneurship. So I was not making money from my business when I left my job. I wasn't even completely sure. I mean, again, I had an idea, like Trump said at one point, I had concepts of a plan, which is again not ideal, not what you really want. But I did have an idea of the business I wanted to start, the business I wanted to run. But frankly, it wasn't fleshed out. It wasn't even on paper when I actually quit my job. And so that just made things challenging. I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you what happened in my experience. I'm also telling you what I have seen happen with others when they followed that particular path, where whether it's out of frustration, whether you feel, in my case, I quit my job, but I've often said I feel like I almost didn't have a choice. And I think some of you probably know what I'm talking about when you are working a job and things may change, because frankly, when I started my last job, I loved it. I felt like I had great support, but things change, of course. And so the lady who hired me, she was gone within 8 months. It wasn't even a year. 8 months after I was hired, and not by choice. She was part of a major down downsizing at the time. And keep in mind, this is 2008. So of course, this is around the time of the Great Recession, and everything was going crazy, the bottom falling out of the financial services industry. So yeah, she kind of got caught up in that. I was blessed not to have gotten caught up in that. And even she and other people who were downsized, I'm careful what I say, and I think words do have power. I think, everyone who is fired or downsized, that can be a blessing too, frankly. So, and she did go on to get probably a better position that she's still in today. I mean, what, 15, 16, however many years later. But at the time, I'm sure that didn't necessarily feel like a blessing. And it was just a difficult time all the way around. But yeah, it went at first. I loved that position. I was enjoying what I was doing, even with that challenging time of transition. But then that changed. And of course, after she left, I got a new boss. And the next boss, she was okay. She was not my first boss, but she was okay. Well, she didn't last longer than that. She was still with the company, but She no longer wanted to be in that position. So anyway, after 2 to 3 more years, I ended up with another boss. And at first, things were good with her until they were not. And then a number of things happened, to which I did not feel secure. I didn't feel supported. It just was no longer a good environment at all. So I really felt at that time I didn't have a lot of choice. Like when I look back on it, I thought, maybe I could have stayed a bit longer, but even if I would have stayed, I would have stayed too much longer after that, because otherwise I may have gotten fired. It was that kind of environment. So yeah, that's kind of what led to me leaving, and me, again, kind of feeling like I didn't have a lot of choice at the time. And while I had, and at the time, I was married, still kind of newly married. Like me and my husband had been married then about a year, maybe a little over a year. And the interesting thing is, my husband had gotten back into law enforcement. And I mean, he was very new in his role. And I mean, his benefits had not even kicked in when I left my job. So again, wasn't the ideal situation. And that is why I say that can be a mistake. If you, again, don't have some savings earmarked, and again, specifically for your business, not savings is not your family savings, your emergency savings, your retirement savings. That's not ideal. If you don't have savings earmarked for your business, and you are already generating some revenue, even if you're generating $1,000 a month, and I know that's not a lot. Some of you may even be like, what? That, what are you going to do with that? And then others of you may be like, I would love to generate $1,000 from my business, because the truth is, a number of business owners, in particular women entrepreneurs, don't generate $1,000 or more in their business. Now, that may or may not be hard to believe, but if you know the statistics, you know that is true. So if you are at least generating $1,000 a month, that is something, and that tends to kind of verify that you have a legitimate, or you have potential for a legitimate business. It's like that provides some validation, um, that you can be successful in what you're doing. Now, that's not a guarantee necessarily, because often you can hustle to make $1,000 a month, but in a lot of cases, and even if you're hustling, you're doing something right. You may not be doing everything right, and it doesn't mean that there's not room for improvement. But if you are able to make at least $1,000, and even better if you're making 1,500, 2,000 or more dollars a month, again, more than likely there is some validation to what you're doing. So I strongly, hear me, people, hear me, ladies. I strongly encourage you to generate some revenue from your business before you go into your business full time. All right. I think that is a big mistake. Now, it's not to say that you cannot recover from it. It's not to say that you cannot overcome that, but it makes it more difficult. And I can attest to that, because the first really couple of years of my business were tough. And that also led to me pulling more from our savings, ours in household savings slash retirement savings, because I hadn't really prepared. I had not effectively, or what's the other word I'm looking for? I hadn't prepared. the way I would have liked to or should have as a new entrepreneur. So, again, mistake number one, do not quit your day job until you are generating some revenue in your business. Don't give up your main hustle for your side hustle when the side hustle is not making any money. All right. I think that's pretty clear. Okay. Second mistake. Second mistake I made, which I think was also pretty significant, and you'll probably notice kind of a theme here because this also has to do with money. This has to do with revenue. And the second mistake is not focusing enough on generating revenue in my business. Now, number one was not already have generated some revenue in the business before going into the business full time. Second mistake is once you're in your business, once you've started your business, please focus, prioritize generating revenue. That should really be your number one priority, number one objective is generating revenue. So this is what happened with me. And again, I see this happen to a number of other people. You are thinking, for one, with me, I was a bit of a corporate snob. I can admit that. And the corporate snob is because I had been working in corporate for all these years. I was sure that I knew certain things that I really didn't know. I was sure that I could have a successful business because after all, I've been in corporate and I've gotten awards and I've done relatively well. Yeah, corporate snob. Because please understand, unless you are in sales, and I mean kind of hardcore sales, not this kind of soft, fluffy sales where you do get a salary no matter what, and then you get bonuses or you get commissions on the side. Unless you have been like a realtor or in direct sales to where you really don't make money unless you sell something, unless you've done that, you don't really understand and probably cannot really appreciate how difficult entrepreneurship can be, especially full-time entrepreneurship. The other exception is if you have seen it up close. Now, if you come from a family of entrepreneurs, if your parents were entrepreneurs, if you saw that up close and personal, okay, well, then you might know. But that wasn't the case with me. That's not the case with a number of people. Both of my parents had jobs. The closest I had been to entrepreneurship was my father and two of my uncles, one of his brothers, one of his brother-in-laws. They ran a landscaping business, but it was on the side, very much on the side. It was like extra money. Like that money did not really dictate or determine our household because my father still had a solid at the time secure city job. My mother also worked. So my grandparents had jobs. My aunts and uncles, the uncle that my father went into business with, or uncles, they also had full-time jobs. One ex-military. There were jobs everywhere. Okay, so I thought I did because of I was well read and I read about people who ran businesses and I read blogs and articles and all of that at the time. And there were certainly women entrepreneurs who I really respected and I kind of followed their journey, but still that's not the same thing. So I did not really appreciate the challenges of having to eat what you kill, you having to hunt for what you get. And so that was a transition in itself that required some mindset shifts. And so I was all caught up in more so appearances. And when I say appearances, I what I mean is more so business appearances, the external, what I call the branding versus the brand. And I'm going to say more about that in just a little bit. But I felt I needed a website, and I needed a really good website, and it needed to be just right. I mean, pretty much perfect or close to perfect. I felt I needed business cards. I felt I needed a logo. All this stuff that really at the end of the day is, I'm not saying it absolutely does not matter, but it just doesn't matter as much as you might think, or as much as I thought at the time. But I actually spent about 3 months trying to build my own website. Yes, I thought I could do that. I drank the Kool-Aid. Again, thinking I'm an intelligent person. I've been in corporate 15 years or so. I was a double marketing and finance major. I'm somewhat tech savvy. I can build my own website because y'all remember I didn't have a lot of money. Now I had nice retirement, I had some savings, but none of that was really supposed to be for my business. So I'm trying to cut corners here. I am trying to be frugal, and so I was like, I'm not hiring a web designer. I can do this myself. Well, 3 months later, I had a 1.5 whole pages of a website. And yes, I said 1.5 because I like to mention that half. It wasn't just one web page. I had 1.5 web pages. Okay, so not good though. Not good, especially after 3 months. Just keep that in mind. We're talking 90 days. It was actually a little longer than 3 months. Over 90 days, pretty much a quarter that I had mostly, I'm not going to say that's all I did, but that took up a lot of my time working on this freaking website. Now, I was doing some other things in terms of really trying to get clear about who my target audience was, who my ideal customer was, what exactly I was offering. I was working on that, but not that much, and not as much as I should have been, because I was working on a website and making sure I had business cards and this stuff that really didn't make me any money, wasn't making me any money. So that is a problem. That is a major problem. And just keep in mind, I spent about 3 months or so working on my website before I did hire a web developer. And then even that process took longer than it should have because I still wasn't really clear on how I wanted my website to look and how to position it and the copy, because the web designer was just designing the website. I still had to come up with the message, the content, so that whole process before my website was like up and running, it was probably 6 to 7 months. And so I didn't make a lot of money in the first 6 months. Really, I didn't make a lot of money really in the first couple of years, 2 to 3 years of my business. Didn't say I didn't make any, but wasn't a lot. It was nowhere close to, remember what I said about thinking that I was going to replace most of my corporate income. That's what I was shooting for. Yeah, that didn't happen. And so this can be a major damaging mistake when you are in business, but you are not prioritizing making money, because businesses make money. That's what it's about. That's not all it's about. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have values. You shouldn't want to help people and have an impact and all of that. But first and foremost, you need to make money to be able to do that other stuff at least more easily. It helps when you are making money for you to make more impact. It helps when you're making money for you to help other people, for you to hire. If you do want to hire people, You want to hire humans. You need to be making money for that to happen. If you are taking care of maybe more than just your family, maybe you help your parents, maybe you help a child, hopefully not an adult child. That's another conversation. But whoever you are helping or you want to help, you kind of need money to do that. And this happens all the time, and especially among women, because some of us, we just want to help everybody, and we're giving, and we're maternal, at least for the most part. Again, there's exceptions. I don't want to necessarily generalize, but I see this a lot. I see more women with this kind of, well, I want everybody to benefit from what I have. I don't want to leave anybody out. But that's what happens. There's nothing wrong with leaving people out in your business. If you want to help, and frankly, even in public service, even in doing civic work or nonprofit work, you're still not necessarily going to help everybody. So I mean, that is it's a worthwhile aspiration or dream, but even then you're probably not going to help everybody, but definitely not in your business. Okay, but understand the ability to help more people and give to more people, again, that tends to be predicated on you being in a position to do that. And you can do that in other aspects of your life. You can do that through a nonprofit. You can do that through working with another nonprofit. If you don't have a nonprofit, well, I said another, like working with a nonprofit, there are basically other ways that you can be a public servant or be more of service than in your business. So that's the second mistake, not prioritizing generating revenue first and foremost, and then actually turning a profit. Because please understand, y'all, please listen, Linda, listen. Revenue does not equal profit. Revenue is not the same as profit. I need you to hear me. I need you to understand that revenue is just sales. That's just money that you make from selling your product and or service. Profit is what's left over. Profit is what's left of your revenue after you subtract expenses. There's typically a cost to running a business. So after you subtract cost of goods, after you subtract the cost of the website, after you subtract, if you have products, again, cost of goods, what materials, whatever it makes for you to, whatever it takes for you to create or get the product, whatever is an expense, overhead, whatever you have to pay for, those are expenses, and that has to be subtracted from your revenue. This is, and this is almost a separate mistake, but it's also very common. All the time, people mistake revenue for profit. And so they're just looking at their sales. They're looking at the money coming in and not really paying attention to the money going out. So just because you sold $10,000 in a month doesn't mean that you profited $10,000. You probably did not. If you sold $10,000, you paid something, even if your profit margin is really big. Maybe your expenses on that $10,000 was only 500. I don't know, but that's still 500. So that means your actual profit was 9,500, not 10,000. So you have to understand that concept first and foremost. And then you need to know your numbers. You need to know the money coming in as well as the money going out. So you want to prioritize revenue, generating revenue, as well as a profit. Now, honestly, in a lot of businesses don't generate profit immediately. I mean, there are businesses that don't generate profit for several years. Take Amazon for one. I mean, biggest retailer in the world. I think for the first 5 to 7, I'm thinking longer. I would have to double check it, but I'm thinking it was longer even than 7, 8 years that Amazon did not generate a profit. Like they operated that way. A number of companies operate that way for a while. They're definitely generating revenue, but not profit. Now, as a small business, and especially as a micro business, a solopreneur, we need some profit. I mean, it certainly helps to be generating some profit. You need to be able to pay yourself. And you cannot do that though if you are not really focused on bringing money in. Like if you're doing a lot of busy work, if you are convincing yourself, this website needs to be perfect, the business cards need to be great, I'm networking, I need to build relationships, and that I'm not discounting that. Relationships are important, but if you're just building relationships and you're not leveraging the relationships, you're not using the relationships to make money, you're not offering those people you're connecting with and you're building the relationship with, you're not offering them something, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're just out meeting people. That's not strategic. Those are not founder moves, CEO moves, president moves, principal moves. Like you at any of those titles you may use, they all at the end of the day though means that you are in charge of bringing in money. Now you may have some help, you may have an assistant, you may have employees, you may have some help in doing that, but it still begins and ends with you. You have to direct them. You have to, you set the tone, you set the vision, the strategic plan. That needs to come from you, and that needs to prioritize revenue. Okay. So please don't make that mistake. Again, just as I said with the first mistake, I'm not saying that this is something that cannot be overcome, but it's going to take longer and it's going to make your life more stressful, and it's just not an ideal situation. Okay. All right. So that's the second mistake. The third mistake is related to that second mistake. Remember, I said I was focusing more on my branding versus the brand. What I mean when I say that, the branding, I consider branding, and I know the term branding is thrown around a lot, and sometimes people use brand and branding interchangeably, although they don't have the same meaning. Branding is really what supports the brand. And I think of branding as the external aspect of a brand. Branding is the website, business cards, logos, colors. That's branding. Your motto or your tagline, branding. But you need to be clear on the brand. Your brand needs to be solid. What is the business about? Who is your target audience? Who is your ideal buyer? You need to know that inside and out. You need to know that group. You need to know that person. You need to drill it down even to one person that you know inside and out. So you know how to speak to them. You need to know how to really connect with them on an emotional level. All of that is brand rather than branding. But that's what you need to be solid on as a business and as a business owner. What is your brand? What do you want people to think about when you are not around, or even when your product or service is not around? But just what comes to their mind when they think of your product or service? And maybe you are the product. Maybe you are a creator. Maybe you are monetizing strictly from your personal brand. Well, what do you want people to think about when they think of you? What do you want to come to their mind? Jeff Bezos once said, which I think is one of the best definitions of a brand, that your brand is what other people talk about when you're not in the room. That's your brand. Now, I'm not saying that's all a brand is about, but that's a key part. That is a key part, because your brand, ironically, is not all about you. My brand is not all about me. Your brand is really more about what other people think and how they perceive it. I know you're probably like, I don't care what people think. And, maybe your coach or your mentor or someone else told you, you got to move and not worry about what people think. I get that, but that doesn't apply to your brand. Okay, that's more of a personal mantra. When it comes to your brand, you absolutely need to care what people think, because your brand is really your business foundation. So that is the other mistake, focusing too much on branding versus the brand. And again, this is very common, because, and especially for people, I think, who come from a corporate background, because you've seen certain things in the corporate sector. You've seen, a certain type of website. You're used to logos, you're used to certain messaging. And again, I'm not saying that stuff does not matter at all, but it doesn't matter as much as you think. And even more so as a small business. Those things that I just mentioned, they tend to matter more with big businesses. What would you think if you went to Coca-Cola's website and it was jacked up? What would you think if you're trying to order from Amazon and their website was jacked up? And I mean, you know, companies like that have had glitches, or, have been down, several times. Facebook has been down, Instagram has been, people lose their damn minds when stuff like that happens. People are not happy. That causes a problem, because these are big companies and you don't expect that. But as a small business, that stuff is not as important, because that many people's not coming to your website. You're not, I mean, let's be honest, especially as a new business owner, your first 6 months, and in a lot of cases, your first 3-4 years, it's not like tens of thousands, let alone hundreds of thousands of people are visiting your website. Now, I'm not going to say it never happens. Maybe you are an exception, but in most cases, I'm telling you what I know, and there's data to back this up. That shouldn't be, your website should not be a priority. It really should not. Business cards. I mean, we're in a day and age where, I mean, some people still use business cards. I use them sparingly. Business cards are not even used that much. You have digital cards. You have, let's just connect on LinkedIn. Let's connect on Instagram. You do not need to spend a lot of money or time on a business card. You don't need to spend that much time on your color palette or your color scheme. No. Get the brand straight. Make sure the brand is solid, and then move on to the branding. What do you stand for? What do you want people to think about when they think of you, when they think of your offer? How do you want people to feel? That is incredibly important, because we need to really connect with our target audience emotionally. You can make them feel something. More than likely, you can make them do something. You need to get them to pay attention before you get them to pay. Some of y'all might miss that, but replay it, rewind it if need be, because that is really important. I'm telling you what, as someone who's been in business now over 12 years, 13 years, yeah, there needs to be an emotional connection. People tend to buy out of emotion. So all of that comes into play in terms of your brand strategy. That needs to be clear. That needs to be solid before you're running around worried about a website or doing all this kind of external stuff. Make sure the inside is good before focusing on the outside. So there you go. There are the 3 mistakes. Number 1, first mistake, quitting your 9 to 5 too soon before you are already generating revenue from your business. Number 2, not focusing enough on revenue once you're in your business, not prioritizing revenue. And number 3, focusing on branding before the brand. So those are the first 3 mistakes, big mistakes that I made, that I see a number of other entrepreneurs make. Again, there's a part 2 to this, and the link to that, I'll have to add it because I forgot I'm on live. So we'll have to get that added for part 2. But definitely check that out. And there will also be a part 3 to this, because again, I'm sharing a total of 7 mistakes. Yes, y'all, 7. And I made more than that, but these are the biggest mistakes I believe I made, and some of the most common. Again, I know I'm not alone. I've seen a number of other entrepreneurs, founders make these same mistakes. And I want to try to help you not to. I mean, you may have already made one of these mistakes. You may still make them down the line, but hopefully not. Hopefully not. When you know better, do better. All right. So if you enjoyed this, by all means, subscribe. If you are, let's see, I have to apologize, guys, because I have not been live in a little while. And so I just going. Looks like there were some people on. If by all means, comment, let me know where you are watching me from. I appreciate it because I understand time is valuable. I don't take anyone's time for granted, and especially on YouTube, because there is so much content and there's a lot of YouTube channels. Not saying that all of it is good or worth your time, but it's still your time. So I appreciate you spending your time with me. If you are a founder, if you are a woman entrepreneur, if you are a creator, and especially if you fit one of those descriptions or roles and you want to go beyond just building a brand. And what I mean by that, that's a phrase, that's, terminology we hear a lot. Build a brand, build a brand. You need to build a brand. You need to grow your brand. I get it. I understand. But I really think we're in a time, and especially with the digital space, or being in the digital space, and speaking of online brands, where we have to go beyond that to really increase brand value, brand equity, brand sustainability. And to do that, again, it goes back to what I was saying about the need to make an emotional connection, and also really speak to the buyer who you want to speak to. And if you especially want to attract a high value buyer, a high ticket buyer, a repeat buyer, repeat customers, you have to be more strategic. You have to, again, go beyond just kind of building a brand. So that's what we're about. And we leverage, through my consultancy, Swag Strategy Solutions, We leverage AI powered and psychology strategies to do that. Obviously, we are in the age of AI, although I do still believe in centering humans. I do believe in centering humans. I'll say that again. But I am still a fan of AI, and I think it is a wonderful, tremendous invention, and of course, one that's still evolving. And so, if that resonates with you, by all means, I invite you to subscribe. And there are some resources in the description. I invite you to connect with me over on Substack, subscribe to the Brand Breakthrough Experience over there, where the podcast is, where some other awesome, actionable content is. But definitely subscribe here on YouTube. And any questions you have, any questions, drop your questions in the comment. Okay, I thought something weird kind of popped up. But drop your questions, your comments, and I will get to them. All right, that is it for me, you guys. Until next time, I am Rachel, again, founder, Swag Strategy Solutions. Until next time, take care and take some action.